Chapter 29. Monica was sitting at her desk, staring at her computer screen. She'd been trawling through computer files and news articles. She now had sufficient information to profile Mr. Stenmore. What she needed was first-hand knowledge of him, and that would be hard to come by. Chrisid Bank was a veritable impregnable fortress, and Mr. Stenmore only frequented 3 places to her knowledge. Each of them presented their own challenges in order for her to talk with him and hopefully learn what her father was involved in. Monica had made the connection between Baxter, her father, Pilgrim, and now Mr. Stenmore. She knew her father didn't work for Mr. Stenmore, but there was a connection. What that connection was, she hadn't been able to find out. Yet. Making her decision, she got up, pulled on her coat, selected a pair of sunglasses, and slammed the bedroom door behind her. She was on her way to Chrisid Bank. Directness would be her approach, even honesty if it called for it. Mr. Stenmore's profile told her he was a factual man, not given to carnal weakness, particular in his habits, and he lived for Chrisid Bank. Her leverage in securing a meeting would be to inform him she had knowledge of the lost Fabergé automaton that had once belonged to the Maharaja of Nagpur. Having learnt about his particular weakness for rare automatons, if she were to engage his mind with such a piece of information, it might just be enough for him to agree to see her. Monica was offered a chair in Mr. Stenmore's office. She took in the Spartan look and immediately understood another layer to this man. He wasn't materialistic, vain, or interested in what other people might think of him. Good. They had that in common. Now sitting across from him, he appeared much older than she'd first imagined, having only seen a photograph from several years ago. He was immaculately groomed in a cuff-linked crisp white shirt, over which he wore a tailored dark 3-piece suit. With his hair combed back, she noticed he had perfectly formed features. There was something about his eyes, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She could easily imagine him as a mannequin in the window of a smart gentleman's store. "I have no wish to appear brusque, Miss Tallenborn," he said doubtfully, "but I am a very busy man. You mentioned to my secretary you had information with regard to the Étoile d'Or Polaire by Maitre Fabergé." By his intonation, she understood the interview time he was granting her would be kept remarkably short. "I understand you're a collector of automatons, Mr. Stenmore." "Please refrain from using rhetorical questions. You have 5 minutes." She recalibrated her side of the conversation to match his succinctness. "As my name confirms my provenance in connection with Étoile d'Or Polaire, I would like to ask you if you're in the market to acquire such a piece." He slowly exhaled, giving her a penetrating stare, saying, "Before we proceed any further, you will provide me with evidence you are who you say you are." "Of course." She pulled her wallet out and handed him a driver's license with the name Monica Tallenborn on it, with an address she'd taken from the white pages. Handing it over, he didn't take his eyes from hers. Pressing the intercom, he summoned Miss Stone. As she entered, Mr. Stenmore was in the process of handing over Monica's driver's license when she stopped him. "Don't bother having it checked. It's a fake." "That will be all, Miss Stone," he said, before adding, "Perhaps some tea." He looked expectantly at Monica. "Yes, thank you," she replied. With Miss Stone out of the room, she began, "Perhaps I ought to explain." "There's no perhaps about it." "I'm Monica Meadows, formerly Monica Phelps, the daughter of Mr. Phelps. She felt truth would be the only way to obtain information from him. "Continue," he said. "I have an interest in a man called Mr. Baxter. He saved me from my father. Mr. Phelps and I are old acquaintances, but nothing more. I know of the circumstances surrounding your father's previous incarceration." He kept quiet about the fact that Mr. Baxter had once served as his personal valet. "My father is very interested in Mr. Baxter, which, as you can imagine, could prove very dangerous for him. I would like to do what I can to prevent Mr. Baxter coming to any harm." He raised his eyebrows in surprise that the young girl in front of him thought she might be able to protect Mr. Baxter in any way, particularly from a man like her father. "Your cause is worthy, but unrealistic." "As you don't know anything about me, I'm surprised you'd make such an assumption," she said. Seeing the truth of her statement, he said, "Then you'll need to enlighten me." "I'm very competent in the retrieval and collation of information. Plus, I'm effective in literal and cyber disguise and tracking. I also have an unparalleled talent when it comes to systems and computers." "Then you have the advantage of me. I abhor them." He smiled for the first time. A light knock at the door signalled Miss Stone's return with their tea. Once she'd left, he continued, "I fail to see why you're in my office today." "Your name was on my father's computer." "In what context?" "There are no direct inferences to anything outside of banking matters and no specific details. However, the tone of the information suggests my father is frustrated by you, which leads me to believe you may have information with regard to my father, which I do not." "I see." He took a sip of his tea before placing the cup and saucer back down. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I know nothing concerning your father that you don't know already," he lied. He noted the look of despondency on her face and was surprised to discover he liked this girl. She was articulate, honest, and forthright, everything her father was not. He couldn't help but feel sorry for the cards that she'd been dealt. The fact she was able to think of another's welfare, namely Baxter's, above her own, spoke volumes about her character. In light of these thoughts, he made an uncharacteristic decision. "Your ingenuity in securing a meeting with me, which I can assure you is extremely rare and notoriously difficult, leads me to believe we could be of some use to one another." She was as surprised as he was, so surprised, in fact, that she couldn't think of what to say. He continued, "As I mentioned previously, the modern age of technology and I are unacquainted, although I have found more recently of late times when access to information outside my normal sphere of interest has been time-critical." She listened intently. If she wasn't mistaken, he was about to offer her a job. "Therefore, I would like to offer you a commission, which would be on a freelance basis. You would be required to research and send me information on a variety of subjects." "Such as?" she asked, surprised. "Recently, I've been interested in alphatropism. I'm not keen on visiting libraries. One never knows who's been touching those books, and as all paper is a porous material—" "I understand." She was quick on the uptake. "What would you like me to look into, specifically?" "There are two fields of current interest to me. The first is, I would like you to compile verified and pertinent information on spectrums of light in relation to plants." "And the second?" she puzzled. "Talonborn was a predictive touch, given my interests in automatons. I would like you to look into the removal by Captain Reginald Augustus Tallenborn of the Étoile d'Or Polaire, taken to the fort of Agra from the Maharaja's palace in 1811 during the Indian Mutiny. How long do I have? As long as a thorough report takes, but as you've already made a head start on my second request, not too long, I anticipate. You're only to communicate with me by mail. You can send it to my home address, which I'm sure you already have. I will set up a personal account for you. I already have a bank account, she stated. Which I predict is closely monitored, he added gravely, holding up a hand to halt her denial. I think we can agree a certain amount of prudence is called for, along with your discretion and silence concerning our agreement. If I suspect our mutual business is compromised in any way, I shall terminate it immediately and with no recourse for you either corroboratively, financially, or legally. Understood, she said. Any questions? He asked. How much does this job pay? I'm not sure. How much is an information gatherer paid? He asked. An investigative journalist can earn anywhere from 20 to 80,000 a year. I think the 80,000 includes dodging bullets. I shall pay you 20,000 per commission, plus an additional 80,000 a year for your complete discretion at all times, to include any devices you use. He paused. These devices one hears so much about. They leave an electronic trail, do they not? Not if you're careful, she acknowledged. Whatever edge she could gain to learn of her father's intentions, she'd take it. Then be careful. I'm sure I do not need to remind you there are dangerous people out there, particularly for the innocent. Mr. Stenmore stood and rounded his desk with his hand extended. Monica took his cue and stood to shake his hand. As she did, she tried not to stare at the green veins in his eyes.